Hi, welcome to Toys in the Hood. Today I'm going to talk about basically thoughts and ideas on going to your first tournament. It's not going to be a guide on how to win, but it's things that you could bear in mind that will help you prepare and get the most out of it. Now, whether it's card games or war games, most of these rules are going to apply to both. We're going to look at how to prepare, what to expect, the attitude that you should go with, painting models. Doesn't apply so much to card games, and should you netlist or should you not netlist, as long as lots of other little things that will help you have the best time. I've been playing tournaments for about 20 years. I think they're a brilliant excuse to get together with your friends, a good excuse to get your armies or your cards to really practice and hone what you're doing. It's a really, really good excuse. Occasionally, I actually do quite well in them. So, if you see my previous videos, you'll see that I sort of won the Throne of Skulls for a little while. It's a long story. But I have genuinely won some. I won a kill team tournament that was at Warhammer World. Got this lovely glass trophy here. I won the Legend of the Five Rings Elemental Championship. This was pretty awesome, as this got me an invite to the World Championship that was in Minnesota. It only got me into the door. In fact, I had to buy my ticket and I had to buy my plane tickets, but it was a really good excuse for a holiday. I had a really, really great time. And then I play local tournaments as well. So, you know, in the last few years, I've won a few Blood Bowl trophies, which are quite nice. And played some other games. In fact, I even painted up a Batman team for the Batman miniatures game. So this was also I could play at a tournament that was happening at Woollerton Hall. Woollerton Hall is a local building in Nottingham, and it was the site of Wayne Manor in the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy. Now, I didn't win that one, but I think I came something like 4th. I did quite well, especially considering I'd only played the game once before I actually went. So I was pretty pleased with myself. But sorry, I digress. First off, what to pack. I'm going to talk about these more individually through the video, but I don't really have to go through the entire video every time. In fact, I'll probably put this in the description so you can see it easily. So you're going to need the rules pack. You're going to need the rules for the game you're playing. You're going to need any latest FAQs and erratas, especially for your own army. You're going to need snacks. You're going to need drinks. You're going to need your army or your deck, which sounds so obvious, but it can be a bit tricky. You might want to bring glue for repairs. You're going to need some means of transporting your stuff from table to table or actually to the site itself. You're going to need comfy clothes and shoes. And then lastly, you're going to need deodorant. It's a bit of a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason, especially when there's lots of you crammed into a hall. And I mean, on a day like today where it is incredibly sunny outside, yeah, really look after yourselves and each other. Before you begin, ask yourself what you want from the tournament. Do you want to go there and have fun? Do you want to make new friends? Do you want to try out new army ideas? You may want to go there to win, which is brilliant and why a lot of people enter tournaments. Probably this video isn't going to help you win, but, you know, brilliant. Go research, do that, it's great. But be warned that if that's the only reason you're going and this is your first tournament, you're probably going to be disappointed. There's only one winner, but there could be hundreds and hundreds of other entrants. Now, they'll have been to tournaments before as well, so having some kind of soft goals beforehand, what you want to get from the tournament, that's really going to help you have a good time. So we're going to look at kind of what to do in the build-up to a tournament first. So prep for a tournament starts weeks, possibly months before the tournament. You're going to buy your ticket, obviously. You're going to get a rules pack, or at least be directed to a website where the rules will be. Read them. There'll be things you need to do in advance before you even get there. You may need to submit army or deck lists in advance, sometimes well in advance so they can be checked before the day. On rare occasions, despite thinking you have actually got a ticket, you may find that you haven't. You need to register again in some form. The Elemental Championship I talked about with Legend of the Five Rings, that meant that I qualified to go to Fantasy Flight Games' HQ in Minnesota. But it didn't mean that they knew that. So I actually had to register. Now, I didn't realise that. And so I'd booked my flights, I'd booked my hotel, I was all set to go to Minnesota, except they didn't know I was going. Fortunately, I realised this the week before the tournament, I was able to sort it out. There may be local Facebook groups, or the rule pack may also be able to recommend like local places to eat, hotels to stay. Book a hotel as soon as possible. You'll get better rates and it's something you don't have to worry about. The night before a tournament, get a good night's rest if you can. If you're in a hotel with mates, I'm not going to tell you not to drink. I'm not your mother and I want you to have fun. But you may want to consider not being hungover in the morning. Hopefully you've painted your models in advance. If not, it may be a late night for you. And early in the evening, check your list and your stuff. Do it early, because if you've forgotten anything, then this is your chance to either find it where you've got it, go out and buy it, or just borrow it off a friend. And know where you're going, know where the tournament is, know where the hotel is. Fortunately, in the last few years, you know, we have Apple Maps and stuff on our phones, so we can find our way fairly easily. It used to be that I'd have to have a list of directions, and the amount of times I could not find Warhammer World were ridiculous. How does a tournament work? Now, you're going to play so many games throughout a day or over a couple of days. How many depends on the game. So card games are generally quicker than miniature games, so you might get a lot more in there. Maybe you can get 8 games in a day with card games, whereas if you're looking at miniature games, you're probably talking at 3 or 4 games at most. After each game, you'll submit your results to the judges. You'll either do this together with your opponent or on your own, one of you goes up. There'll probably be some sort of results slip that you fill in and hand back. Usually the first round is random, then you go into Swiss pairings. This is where you'll play someone who is doing as well as you. So the winners play the winners, the losers play the losers. So if you win your first game, your next game will be against someone who also won their first game. Lose that game, you'll play someone who has also won one, lost one. How will it work on the day? So you're going to play many games throughout a day or over a couple of days. How many depends a lot on the system. So card games generally quicker. You might play, say, 8 games in a day. I mean, I think the Star Wars Unlimited games I've started to play, you play the best of 3 in an hour. So if you're playing 8 games of those, you could potentially have 24 games in a day, especially if you get through to the finals. If you're playing a miniature game, then that takes a lot longer. A game of Warhammer 40,000, you're probably looking at 2 hours to play. So you might just get 3 of those in a day. After each game, you'll submit your results to the judges. You'll do this either by filling out a slip and handing it in individually, or you'll go up with your opponent. They'll probably have given you a sort of result slip to fill in. Although a lot more websites nowadays are available to track tournaments, so you can sign up to those and just put your results in straight away. Those are really, really cool because you find out the results and where you're sitting quite quickly. Usually the first round will be random, and then you'll go on to Swiss pairings. This is where you play someone who's basically doing as well as you. So if you win the first game, your next game will also be against the person who's won their last game. If you lost that game, you'll play somebody who's also lost their game, which means your first game can really, really suck. But after a couple of games, you sort of find a level. So if you've won your first game and lost your second game, you're going to play someone else who's only won one of the 2 games they played. So what happens is as a tournament progresses, it actually becomes more fun because your games are more at your level. Take a look at the timings. These may change on the day, so some games will drag on. There may be technical issues, something like that, that causes it to take a little bit longer than told. I'd expect something like half an hour to an hour at the beginning to be able to get registered and set up, and then something like 15 to 30 minutes between games, maybe a bit longer for lunch. Nowadays, a lot of these results are filed on websites, which are a lot quicker, although it is a nightmare if there's any problems getting them set up. And when that suddenly has this knock-on effect of making the breaks quite tight. Now, bearing in mind, time between games is probably the minimum. If you finish your games on time, or if you finish your games earlier, you're going to have a bit of extra time. You might be able to wander around, look at the other armies. If you're in a gaming store, you can do some shopping. But you will have that kind of time to kill, which in the beginning you're like, wow, I'm in a new store, this is great, I'm going to look around. As the day goes on, you kind of find yourself twiddling with your thumbs sometimes, so maybe bring a book or something. Or, let's be fair, you know, you'll make loads of new mates, so it will be fine, but just be aware of it. Take a drink with you and some sort of snack, just in case your lunch break is cut short. You might find that you haven't got time to do it. Before your first game, or before any game, you're going to need to find your table. Think about how you're going to move your army or your decks around. It's a good idea, especially for miniature games, to bring some sort of tray that you can transport everything in. You need to be able to easily put the models on there, move them around. Just a flat tray, like just a tray that you'd eat your dinner off on your lap, is probably perfect for this, as it's easy to load up and off you go. If you start using the kind of, in fact I've got some just here, you start using foam trays like these, then suddenly the models, you have to pack them in, you have to take them out, it becomes a bit of a faff. The table that you go to probably have some sort of marker telling you what number it is, something like that. It's not a bad idea to get there as quick as you can. It gives you the choice of side. This won't guarantee you a place on that edge in any sort of war game, but it's good for a couple of reasons. Firstly, you're less likely to move sides from the one you're on already. So if you get the best side already, even if your opponent wins the choice of sides, he might still stay where he is, because who wants to move? It's a faff. So that might give you a tiny, tiny edge. The other one, and this is a really big one, is that if you're on a table on the ends, then you'll get the side with the most space, and it'll just make your games more comfortable. Especially if you're playing somewhere like Warhammer World, where you end up with rows and rows of tables. People are pressed up against each other. But if you're at the ends, or if you're at the kind of the top or the bottom tables, you've got a lot more space. When you meet your opponent, introduce yourself, shake hands, generally be pleasant. You're about to spend an hour at least staring at each other, so really make sure you get off to the right start. And before the game even starts, if you can, ask your opponent any questions you're unsure of. It's best to do this before you start rolling dice. You're under a bit more pressure when a game is on, and you don't want to be arguing over rules. As a general rule, whenever you can, try and ask questions before they're important. It will really help you keep your cool as the game goes on. And it'll help your opponent too, because you won't be aggressively challenging them. If it's not happened, it's not an argument. If there's models your opponent's got that you've not seen before, then make sure you know what they are. Conversions or 3D prints nowadays might not look like the models you think they are. The same goes for dice. Some of the customised ones, they're not very clear. You know, the ones look like sixes. You never know if the symbol is a 6, symbol is a 1. Find this out beforehand. It'll stop you worrying in the middle of a game. Painting. So obviously this is just wargaming, doesn't apply to card games. The usual rules are going to be that you've got models that have to have 3 colours on and base them, which can... Well, that's a very, very broad brush. So you'll see some amazing miniatures, especially if there's a painting competition. But you may see some that are a bit more slapdash, really, and are just ready to go. Some tournaments actually let you play with unpainted models as well. If unpainted models are allowed, then this is great news if your own models aren't painted. It's great news if you've just bought yourself a new unit that you're dying to try out. But remember, this applies to your opponents too. So your opponents can turn up with unpainted models. They may well have new units that you've never seen. They may have gone and bought a whole new army just for this tournament to take advantage of the latest rules. So you may be in for a bit of a tougher time. You didn't ask, but my personal opinion is that unpainted models are pretty horrible in a tournament. I love the storytelling. It's not about, you know, it's not just about the winning when you've kind of got beautifully painted. Well, they don't have to be beautifully painted. You know what I'm talking about? I'm not elitist in that way. I'd rather play an army that somebody has kind of loved and painted, and you know, we tell a story there, and it feels exciting. If you're just turning up with grey plastic models, it feels a lot to me like we're really just playing with toys. And I'm not a fan of that. Yeah, I'll see the hate comments. Thanks. So what to take? Tools. Well, you're going to have to take your stuff. So check what you're expected to bring yourself. You're almost certainly going to need your own tools and dice. So you're going to need a tape measure, maybe, set of dice, templates are a good bet. You'll need rules, but I'll talk about that later on. Quite often it's easiest just to use your opponent's stuff or let them use yours. Especially if you're both using counters or dice that are the same in the game. You don't want to get them mixed up. Before touching any of your opponent's stuff, ask for permission. It's just good manners. Then there's bling. So sometimes you're going to get yourself some really nice stuff. For my Legend of the Five Rings playset, I've got some really beautiful stuff. So I've got a box that my deck goes in and all of the extra equipment. I had 5 metal ring tokens. Put those a little bit closer so you can see them. These are for each of the elements. They're double-sided. I then have to represent different tokens in the games, these metal tokens. Let's try that, make that a bit clearer. There we go. I should probably just cut the image in, really, shouldn't I? That would be better. Well, we live and learn. There's a little wooden turn token, and then there's an honour dial. So this is all really, really beautiful stuff. I've really enjoyed playing with it. It really, especially with Legend of the Five Rings, which has a very kind of ceremony feel to it, really, really improved my enjoyment. But it's something else to worry about losing on the day. And I mean, I did at the Games Expo playing in one of the tournaments. I just mislaid my coins. They were just in the side of my bag, but I didn't know that for an hour. And while I could keep playing, I just had that going on in the back of my mind. Now, many of you won't have massive anxiety issues like I appear to have, but it's something to bear in mind. Make sure you pack glue. With all the best intentions, models will break as you're playing. Remember that resin or metal models are going to require super glue. Plastic models are going to want plastic glue, or polystyrene cement as we used to call it in the old days. In a similar vein, it's not a bad idea to take spare card protectors to protect stuff. Either if you win any cards on the day, if you trade for people, or if you have to borrow them off a mate or something, you find you're missing one. A few card protectors are really going to help you out. You're going to need to bring the rules. Now, it's okay to not know all the rules. What's not going to be okay is going in thinking you know the rules and then arguing with people over them when actually you don't. Now, there's no harm in asking your opponent to show you a rule that you're unsure on. Don't make an argument of it. Just say that you're unsure. Can they please show you the rule? The more open and honest you are with people, the better. Some games will have vast amounts of rules. When I used to play Warhammer 40,000 in 6th edition, I played a Red Scorpion Space Marine army which had an allied Imperial Knight and an allied Imperial Navy Thunderbolt fighter. This meant that I was bringing something like 8 books to a game with me. Now remember, you don't need to know the ins and outs of your entire army book or the entire cards that are available to you. You only need to know the rules for the units or the cards that you've brought with you. And make sure you know them well enough to be able to keep the game going at a reasonable pace. Some games will have living rule books. You'll be able to download those to your phone or your tablet, which is nice and easy to transport. I say gone are the days when we used to bring 8 rule books with us. You'll also have erratas. So some games erratas can be a bit tricky to keep up with. So maybe go onto the website, of the company for it to get the latest version. Some rules packs will actually tell you, if like an errata comes out the day before, if they're playing with that or not. The old Throne of Skulls tournaments at Warhammer World, they used to say that if the codex was released before 2 weeks of the release of an army, then it was okay. If it had come out the weekend before, then you weren't allowed to play with it. So army lists and deck lists. So like Santa Claus, make your list, check it twice. Some online army builders are really, really good for this, but you do need to make sure that it's updated regularly. Don't mess up your list just because you've used out-of-date points costs. If you get to the end of the tournament, someone spots it, you may find all your results are wiped out, which is just depressing. So really, really make sure you're happy with everything. Ideally, you'll have a copy, you'll need a copy of the army list for yourself and for the organisers, or the deck list. Then you may want to take copies as well. I always think it's really nice to take a copy for your opponents that you're going to play, and for yourself and for the organisers. Especially, one thing's really nice is it's like if you leave the list with your opponent, it's a nice memory for them of when they look through and to look at the armies they've played or the decks they've played. Who knows, you might inspire somebody to play that the next time. And many tournaments require you to submit your lists in advance, so make sure you do that. On the day, you don't want to be turned around. And to make your list, you can net list. So net listing is where you get your deck or your army list off the internet, usually one that everyone's raving about. It makes sense. The winner of the tournament probably does have a really good list. And there's nothing wrong with doing that, but there's a few things that I think you do need to be aware of. Firstly, whoever's list it is, they will have spent ages playtesting it and tweaking it. They know what works, they know how to use it. So you'll need to do the same if you want to win with it. Secondly, everyone else will know what's in your list and how it plays. And thirdly, they can be a bit dull. I mean, my favourite example of this was early days of X-Wing. There was like a 3 B-Wing list, and basically it was a gun line, and it just lines up and it sits there and it shoots. Every unit was the same. Now, I mean, you've got to play games with your army list, your deck list. You've got to play with it for the whole day. You've got to make sure that you're prepared, whether you're going to enjoy playing that 8 times. I know I wouldn't. There's food and drink, so some tournaments can take a while, basically. Some snacks are going to be helpful. Drinks are important too. When there's air conditioning and you're doing a lot of talking, the room's going to be quite dry. You're going to kind of want to keep lubricated for this. Think about the types of drinks and the food you're having as well. If you find that you have sandwiches for lunch and then you have a big carb slump, well, it's one thing doing that in the office, but you don't want to be doing that at a tournament where you want to be in your peak condition. So just have a think about what you're doing there. Clothes are important. Shoes are one of the main ones. You could potentially be stood up for ages as you're playing, especially war games. Card games, far more civilised. Try not to wear anything offensive. I'm really guilty of this in one of my early tournaments where I turned up in a tournament in a Warhammer World with a t-shirt that basically said, "I fucked your girlfriend" on. In hindsight, that was a real twattish thing to do. And the staff in the store, they did actually ask me to change it. But they only did that after they'd taken 50 quid for the Imperial Armour book I bought. Bit annoying. But yeah, I shouldn't have done it. Sometimes there'll be costume contests. So I've dressed as a scarecrow for the Batman Miniatures Game tournament. That was good fun. And then for one of the Legend of the Five Rings tournaments, I dressed up as a Crane Samurai. I didn't win either of them, but quite often you get prizes just for taking part. So that's pretty cool. One thing to accidentally, you can't accidentally do this. Do not wear Nazi paraphernalia to a tournament. Okay, that's for the Warhammer 40,000 players out there. Just don't. And then the results. At the end of the day of the tournament, there's going to be some sort of award ceremony. It takes a bit of time for people to kind of gather up all the results at the end of the game. You may be hanging around, especially if you've just had your ass handed to you in the last game, and it's been over in minutes, and then everyone else is taking 2 hours to play. It can be tempting to just head home, especially if you know you've not done that well. But if you can stay, then it's great. It's really good to show your appreciation of the winners, and you can have a chat with people you've played before, see how everyone's getting on. And in fact, a lot of places will have prizes other than best general. There might be best sporting, there might be best painted, most kills, there may be a wooden spoon, and sometimes there's just random spot prizes. One thing that's also worth saying is, like, if you come with your mates, even if you arrive separately, you know, don't just disappear when the results are there and everyone hands around. When I won my Warhammer 40,000 Throne of Skulls tournament, I was so pleased with myself. My two mates that I'd been going to tournaments with for, I think, 10 years before, they buggered off and didn't see me. And then big game companies may provide more prize support as well. For example, Fantasy Flight Games provides lots of organised play, really nice kits with lots of cards. This means that everyone virtually comes home with a prize, which is really, really nice. I'm a huge fan of this. And that's it. That's my video on tournaments. I'd really recommend giving tournaments a go. I find they're a great way of getting games in, meeting other players, and giving you something to kind of focus your hobby. I've been Steve, and this is Toys in the Hood. Please like and subscribe. I'm on something like 830 subscribers. I really want to hit 1,000 subscribers. You know, any support means a lot to me. So, yeah, thank you so much, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.